Is there a writing craft book on your bedside table? Has it been there for a while?
Do you keep meaning to get past chapter 2 or chapter 1 or just the first page?
Then the Words to Write By podcast is for you. Hi, I'm Renee. I teach composition and creative writing to college students. My background is in poetry, but I'm working on my memoir.
And I'm Kim. I'm trained as a science journalist, but now I'm trying my hand at short fiction. Each week we'll be tackling a chapter of some well-known, but perhaps not so well-read writing craft book.
Together, we'll uncover brilliant insights, face the hard truths, and totally disagree when the author is wrong.
This is our podcast, after all.
And then we're going to take what we learn and apply it to our own writing
by doing the book's suggested exercises.
We're inviting you to read along, or just tune in for the Cliff Notes version.
We're committed to improving our own craft, one writing advice book at a time, and we'd love for you to join us. Welcome to the show.
Welcome to the show. I just want to take a minute to remind you that we got a Patreon account. Something cool about the Patreon account, we are releasing the first bonus episode from the first episode dedicated to Judith Barrington's writing the memoir. We're offering that for free. So you get a chance to see and listen to what a bonus episode sounds like.
Right. If you listen to the last episode, you heard the exercise where Renee attempts to tell a family story, and we went into the weeds a bit with how that worked. And I did it myself too, and I think that I had different difficulties and different aspects of it. So if you really are trying to get a feel for what these exercises do, I think hearing both of our examples really highlights the difficulties and what you can get out of it. So that's on our Patreon account at Words to Write By Podcast at the Patreon site, and you can find the link on our website. Also, before we get started, just remember that we do a process group, not exclusively for memoir writing, but just writers in general, and we hold that through Meetup on Wednesdays at 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, and you can find that link on our website. Okay, I think we should get going.
Let's get going.
But first, I'm going to have a few interviews with some memoir writers.
My name's Janice Kehler. The name of my book is Ode to Olympic Dreams, and it's a coming-of-age story of when I was an Olympic hopeful during the 1970s.
In our previous podcast, we talked about how memoir is more than just a story, but it is also a place for self-analysis and judgment. Did you find this to be the case for your memoir?
Yeah, it was the motivation for the memoir. I had a very curious question based on my own experience. And then as the Olympics evolved from the 70s into the 2016 era, there was so much scandal and drug doping. It wasn't my experience. And I just wanted to know, like, how did all of this survive? Because I valued the Olympics. Even though I never made the Olympic team, I just valued the experience. And it just didn't seem that was coming across. So I wanted to explore that. And I did a lot of research, history research. I looked at the sociology of the Olympic Games. There's a lot of scholars that have written about it from a sociological perspective. Is it a spectacle? Does it mean anything to people? Is it just entertainment? I did a lot of research to try to answer that question. And then as I started writing my memoir, I tried to take my story and through symbols and experience, describe the answer to that question. Why has the Olympic Games survived? Is it worth it for it going forward? Should we go to the Paris Games? There's journalists, sports journalists that have been very clear that the games should end. It's not a worthwhile cultural endeavor.
And that kind of judgment, how did that affect your story, your memoir?
Well, because the history had roots in the 70s. So drug doping, for example, I was on an international team and I was 17 years old and I was at the starting line and I'm standing beside an East German woman who has a beard, and I had no idea what that was or why that was, other than the fact that she was just very athletic and I wanted to win the race, and I didn't know. That's the story of drug doping in the history of the games. I talk about it a lot in the book, but it had a huge impact on me for that race. I couldn't run. I felt like I was watching a television show. watching somebody else win the race. In athletic terms, it's psyched me out, literally.
It sounds like self-analysis really elevated the story of your experiences to something more than just somebody that was an Olympic hopeful in the 1970s.
Yes, I think that. Thank you. That's very well put.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
I'm Marlene Bumgarner. I'm the author of Back to the Land in Silicon Valley, which is a memoir of the nearly a decade that my husband and I and our two children spent living off the grid in the 1970s.
There's the obvious narrative to your book. Would you say there's an element of self-analysis?
There is. There is. I don't think it would have happened without the help of an editor and a memoir writing workshop that I went to that helped me understand the difference between a memoir and a biography.
I remember a part of your book where you were in an accident with your car. And there's a lot of both looking at what was happening in the moment, but also some of the decisions that got you to that point. Did you find that you had more judgment writing that section, or was it more just the events that happened?
When I wrote it, I didn't have the judgment. This memoir took me nearly 20 years to finish, from the start of just writing little pieces, little stories, the goats, the chickens, friendships, so forth.
The fun stuff.
But then I attended a writing workshop, a memoir writing workshop, and that was a weekend of really intense writing. And the feedback that I got from the teacher and the other memoirists was, we want to know how you felt while you were in that hospital bed. We want to know how you felt when you got out of the hospital. We want to know how you felt as you began to make a decision about whether to go back to the land or not. And I hadn't been aware that that was a part of a memoir. So in my initial writing, no, I didn't have that kind of judgment, but I added it in. I went back through the entire memoir and added that judgment in a number of places.
The people asked the question, so they knew there had to be judgment. You just didn't have it the first time through.
Right. I had all those thoughts, but I hadn't thought to put them into the memoir itself.
Thank you. This is a good conversation.
I'm glad to have been able to help.
All right, let's get started. This chapter is chapter 2, and it is called
Who Cares? Who cares? Who cares? And other thoughts on getting started.
So each writer has a different style. She also is not a big and bullet point sort of writer. And so we sort of decided to tease out two themes for the story, kind of one of a existential, metaphysical question about who cares, and then some practical suggestions. So we'll start with the big question.
Okay, so yes, she doesn't do bullet points like Bickham, but she does have quite a few activities in here. And this one, for this one is, why do you care about this or this memoir?
She says that can be hard.
It can be hard, but if you know the answer to that question, it cascades down into kind of the meaning of your memoir. And if you know it, then that's what helps people connect to your memoir. It's more not just important to you, but to other people.
That's a big, tall order when you sit down to write a memoir. You know, for fiction, it's like, I want to entertain people, or I got this idea in my head and I want to try writing it out. But it sounds like it's a lot heavier prospect.
Yeah, and it plagues me because I'm always asking myself, why do I care about this? And I care about it because it happened to me. But why are people entertained by it, or how do they connect with it? That's the key, right? Because that's the mark of a memoir. That's why people read a memoir.
She also goes on to saying that, you know, you have to know about this because other people are going to basically tell you it's not interesting, or you'll start talking to them and their eyes will glaze over.
Right. And what's the point question that will plague you, or at least me. Mm-hmm. I guess if you know why you care about it, it will develop this authoritative voice when you're speaking, apparently. You'll be an authority on the subject, and it will come through in your writing.
I think that's one of the cool things about being a writer in general is just the fact that you've published a book other people respect, because so many people out there want to write a novel or want to write their memoirs.
But how many people actually finish it, or at least start it?
She starts talking about how first you need to find out what your obsessions are, which sounds very Ray Bradbury.
I get echoes of other books in here. We get some Ray Bradbury, we get a little bit of Bickham, and then we also have some Alan Moore in here.
So How does she say to find your obsession?
Okay, so she says, in deciding what to focus on, you can find important clues by examining your preoccupations, i.e. your passions. Here's a few of the questions. What things do you think about over and over again? What stories haunt you? Which people from the past do you dream about? What makes you passionate when you think about it or talk about it? And what do you argue about? Ongoing obsession sometimes is a result of difficult, tragic, magical, or unexpected events or circumstances in our lives.
Those are some good questions. And then it comes together in this really great quote. The fact is that writing, like any creative undertaking, carries with it both pain and great joy. The pain is often inherent in the most fertile subject matter. The joy lies in transforming that subject matter and thus moving it through in a way that helps us grow while we create something of value to others. I really love that line.
That was a good one. Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to make this a turn the interview. I'm trying to avoid basically grilling Renee about her memoir on these things, but do you ever feel that way?
Yeah, all the time. It's the stuff that you've avoided writing, and then when you can finally like meet it, you realize it turned out really good. Or sometimes there was one thing I wrote about that I thought had no importance whatsoever, but I just was kind of at a loss of what to write about, so I just picked some random thing that happened in my life that I kind of think about a lot, but I'm like, it's not important. It's just a weird random obsession, perhaps. And I wrote about it, and they were like, oh my God, where did this come from? This is great. I'm like, really? It's dumb.
Now you gotta tell me what it was.
I went through this very short period of, I was like, my mom had married my stepdad. He was kind of a jerk face. And I was going to school. I started going to third grade in this one place in Sacramento. And I started randomly calling kids asshole. I just started doing that. I just would sit there at the schoolyard and someone would pass by and I'd be like, asshole. And then a teacher eventually caught on at the schoolyard and was like, hey, don't say that. And I immediately felt horrible that I had done it at all. I was like, why did I even do that? And then like a couple days later, I was on a bus and this kid gets off the bus randomly to just go home. And as he's walking by my window, I flipped him off.
Okay.
I don't know why I did it. Anyway, it was like immediate. I guess the kid told on me, which is good. And the bus driver like stopped and came over and was like, why are you doing that? And I'm like, I don't know. Never did it again. Never ever. But I have no idea why. It clearly something was going on.
And how did you transform that moment in your writing?
I don't know. I don't remember. It was a while ago.
You did.
I took it and was like, well, I can guess what was going on. And I was, I think, talking about like the underlying things going on at home and how I think I was like testing out the rage of my stepfather. Mm-hmm. Like testing out calling people names and stuff. And like,
that's how you transformed it.
Yeah. But it was kind of a guess. It was like, I'm not sure why I think about this, but on a logical point of view, I guess I could use that to explain something else.
I think there's a certain amount of creativity in transforming something. If it was obvious, it wouldn't be transformed.
Right.
And I liked this part that she talked about how some books on writing life stories offer a long list of subjects to jumpstart you. And it's like a bullet point. Like, think about your first day of school. Think about your wedding day. Think about the death of your mother. And she doesn't agree with that approach.
Yeah, she doesn't think they're very good prompts. She wants you to figure out your own.
Yeah. And this is the line. It is not the obvious landmarks of a life that hold the passionate moments, the transformations, the painful growth. Those lie within incidents and in relationships that are unique to each of us. So what she's saying is that a generalized prompt book cannot help you tap in because they're going to ask you about the same things that happen to everybody else.
Right. I mean, I don't necessarily care about your graduation from high school, but I care about Maya Angelou's. Right? So it just depends. What are your milestones? Mm-hmm. Your milestones are going to be different from other people's milestones.
Yeah. And then at the end, she's talking about part of the goal for a memoir, why you care, is that when people read your memoir, they get to share your experiences.
Right.
people say in fiction books, you want to get lost in a book, you want to get lost in these ideas, but they're not real. But there is something really solid about getting to experience what it is like to be like a single mother. Or she talks about reading a memoir that was set in Alaska, and then talks about the environment the writer was in. Though I had never been to Alaska, it became home while she was reading the book. Not that I necessarily think I would want to be in your home growing up, Renee, but
I didn't want to be in my home growing up, but that's all right. I'm better now.
Any other big, deep thoughts you got out of this?
Oh, so here's the thing. Like Bradbury, she kind of mixes it in there. Again, not like Bickham. She doesn't bullet points. You kind of have to like read, and then it comes at you, and you didn't expect advice. So it's like in there. Oh, there it is, but it's not bullet pointed. One thing I found this actually probably works for novel too, or novelists. It takes time to learn.
Yeah.
Writers, more than most other artists, seem to expect of themselves instant expertise, she says, and talks about the problems of telling people you're a writer and they think you've already written something, like published something. It's like, no, I'm a writer, I'm writing.
Mm-hmm.
And so that can come with its own issues. But she talked about this incubation period where part of learning how to write comes with letting these things about it and through practice incubate. And that's not quantifiable.
Yeah. This is kind of the other thing. I had a list of practical suggestions, and this whole idea of an apprenticeship. I mean, this is why people do MFAs, right? Because it gives them a chance just to learn how to do it.
Well, you went to journalism school.
And I got that from journalism school. And we actually get that from college in general. It gives you a chance to learn how to do these things. One of the great things about like university in general, or like my journalism program, was not only was it telling us how to do these things, but it was going to launch us in a path to do journalism straight out of the gate. And an MFA program can be a little bit more nebulous of how to go about being a writer, because you kind of end up being a teacher out of your MFA program.
Yeah, you get paid to apprentice other people.
Yeah.
Eventually, but maybe. There were focuses, like I was in poetry,
Mm-hmm.
and then there's fiction. I don't know if they had a creative nonfiction major back then. They might do now. But, I mean, you have your different focus, but what are you going to do with it after you're done? I mean, everyone there has the goal of publishing.
Right.
Okay, cool, you've got that for your personal stuff, but you're spending lots of money on this thing, so maybe you'll get a job out of it someday. And a lot of people hope that they would teach. They would have apprentices and get paid to apprentice other people.
She talks about how in today's age, a lot of people have to patch together their apprenticeship.
I mean, that's all we've had, right?
Definitely, my creative approach has been a hodgepodge of things that I've put together.
What's your hodgepodge history of being a writer?
Well, I got formal training for journalism, but then hodgepodge, I would say I went to a writer's conference. I went to Bread Loaf. I joined a critique group where I was like presenting every week for something to kind of go through that and gain reactions. I had another critique group that met more sporadically. I've recently met up with a writer who's a bit more advanced in publishing and such, and we meet weekly to both give critiques on each other's work, but also kind of to more of accountability buddies, to talk about what we're doing, what we're taking steps to do, and to encourage each other. And I mean, there's a podcast too. I think this podcast, going through these books carefully, and it's almost like taking a class.
Yeah. I mean, I've leveled up, definitely. The podcast is big. It really, I mean, we're going through these books and we're tearing them apart, and then we're also like doing the activities. Like all of that adds up. That's pretty much kind of what a class does.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. When you have just a couple people at a time, it's a bit more meaningful than doing it with a full class.
Yes. Totally.
But a full class is an easy one to sign up for. What I got out of this was how critical it is to have other writers around you, especially for memoir, where it's a lot closer to you.
Yeah.
As far as the classes go, she spent a bit of time talking about bad teachers.
We've all had some of those.
And not just bad teachers, and I didn't get anything out of this person, but bad teachers that actually are big name writers that get called in to do these classes. Everyone's so excited to be able to rub elbows with this famous writer, And that famous writer maybe picks a couple of adults in the class that, you know, they want to polish and ignore everybody else. And that can really suck.
Yeah. Only one teacher came close to that, and it wasn't that bad. Mm-hmm. But they definitely, once there's favorites to be had, it's kind of annoying at that point. It's like, well, then what's the point? Why am I here?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Another example she had was a notebook, which was kind of Lamont.
Yes, keep a notebook, and pretty much for the same reasons. Like she says that you'll forget things, write down anecdotes that, you know, have bigger meaning, just like notes to self.
I liked also that you can become adept at recording the important phrase or image that will take you back to that moment of insight, which was very much Anne Lamont's, you know, Demi Moore.
Yes, yeah. Demi Moore, that's right. Yeah. And what was the one about reading? There was stuff in here about reading.
Reading other memoirs. That was also a really big one.
Okay, so we have not done Stephen King's On Writing on the podcast, but you can get it free online. Just type in On Writing Stephen King PDF. I have actually read the whole thing, cover to cover, amazingly. One of the few that I did before the podcast. I actually read it. But she says something about reading that sounds very similar to what he was saying. She suggests that we read other memoirs.
Crazy thought.
Right? As part of our apprenticeship, as part of learning to be writers, you have to read for inspiration and other things. And she says, although there are an astonishing number of aspiring writers who seem to be uninterested in other people's books, you simply cannot be a good writer unless you are also a good reader. Just as composers go to concerts and artists visit galleries, writers read. And this, I would say, is 190% true as someone who teaches or taught community college and taught creative writing, but also taught any kind of writing. I think a lot of aspiring writers don't really want to write. I think they want to make a movie.
A Netflix series.
Or a Netflix series, exactly. But they don't have the money or resources to do such a thing. So they go to what they seems low-hanging fruit, what everyone supposedly can do, which is write.
Which goes back to the whole idea of the apprenticeship and the requirement for training to do it, because it doesn't just happen.
It doesn't just happen. And so, I mean, it sounds like I'm poo-pooing on people, but I've been in a lot of workshops, dear listener, and you know who reads and who doesn't, like right away. And it gets old. So freaking read more, damn it.
She talks about how one of the reasons to read other memoirs is to look at the structure, because I think a really overwhelming thing when you start a book is how to begin it and how to actually tap into your life. You got your entire life, you got these incidents you want to talk about, and how do you actually like put them in place. So you had like 3 memoirs, and we just thought we'd cover like real quickly like what the structure of those memoirs are and what you got out of reading them.
Yeah, there's a really big, wide variety of options for you as a memoirist, depending on how you want to tackle it, because there's just so many different kinds of memoirs, and not just in subject, but in like form. And I have way too many books. So Kim was like, bring some books. And I said, okay. So the first one is Wild. Have you read this one?
Or I've read parts of it.
Okay, this one actually was turned into a movie. It is a commercial book by Cheryl Strayed, and it is about her dealing with the grief of her mother who had died by hiking the Pacific Crest Trail.
Yeah.
And it is written amazingly. Like, it's really, really well done. It's a beautiful book.
Like, what do you mean written amazingly? Like really vivid or really emotional or all that stuff?
All of it. Well, I mean, that's the problem, is I don't think of it in those terms. I think of it as the prose.
Okay, so she's just a really good writer.
She's a damn good writer. It's beautiful.
And does she start at the beginning and go all the way through to the end of the trail, or how does it?
Yeah. Well, she actually starts with the death of her mother.
Okay. And then
yeah. Here, this part.
This is a very highlighted book, I'm noticing.
Oh, yes. So what I did here is I Bickam'd it. I was trying to figure out when the writer was telling and showing. Were there sequels? Were there not sequels? And I was highlighting the difference.
I see. That would be an example of a linear story. Basically, she had this event, she had a thing that she did, and she basically could just write it straight on through.
Right.
Okay. And for a lot of people writing memoir, there is a specific thing they want to talk about. And so you can just basically hit it in a linear fashion like that.
Yeah, it's beginning to end. It follows a linear path. The other one, I just got this one, Wife, Daughter, Self, a memoir and essays by Beth Kephart.
And it's written wife/daughter/self.
Yes. Even the title itself should reveal what kind of book this is. This is a person who probably teaches in an MFA program. There's verse in it. Just flipping through the book, you've got this chapter called Double Parentheses, and it's got 3 paragraphs, and then it leaps, and then it has a paragraph, and then it has a list. And so it's not written traditionally.
It's got lots of those little markers in between sections every page. So there's at least one different section every page or two.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Yes. So it's written. Oh, here's a picture. Yeah, that's lots of italicized. It's not maybe mainstream.
It wouldn't
the
be
hipsters would say.
Or it wouldn't be, as the Wild says, Oprah's Book Club 20.
The Wild book has the Oprah Club sticker. Beth Kephart's book does not, but on the bottom it does say National Book Award finalist.
Okay.
Which I think is a higher honor than Oprah.
But not as commercially successful.
But not as commercially successful, no.
Okay, and then one more book.
This one supposedly was also a national bestseller, but you probably never heard of the person, Rick Bragg. And the book is called All Over But the Shoutin'.
Sounds like a family drama story.
Yep. This is family drama. Not super, it's not like Augustin Burroughs, where everyone's freaking crazy.
Okay.
And drug addicts.
But here we got chapter 2, Lies to My Mother.
Yes, Lies to My Mother. It's kind of like it's a coming-of-age story. Mm-hmm. It's a coming-of-age story looking back.
Mm-hmm. So it's got like different aspects of that person's life to support a larger theme.
This one says, but at the center of his soaring memoir is Bragg's mother, who went 18 years without a new dress so that her sons could have school clothes and picked other people's cotton so that her children wouldn't have to live on welfare alone.
But this would be a good one if someone wanted to tell a large segment of their life, but didn't want to start with like, in 2nd grade, da-da-da, in 3rd grade, da-da-da. Like going to one of these books would help in reading that and seeing how they structured it, how they went in and out of pieces.
So this one, All Over About the Shoutin', this is an adult narrator looking back, but also focusing mostly on childhood. And so it is a coming-of-age memoir. Mm-hmm. Wife, Daughter, Self, it's not coming of age in the sense of the traditional sense of they're growing up, right? Mm-hmm. This is about this person's relationship with their husband, perhaps a failing relationship, and then how her or as a daughter had something to do with it, and then
how she discovered herself.
How she discovered herself. Yes, you can see wife, daughter, self. And then Wild is also kind of coming of age, but not in the sense of childhood. It's her just coming to terms with and grieving her mother, and also having some really she was a sex addict.
That's a great little extra bit there.
She writes about it beautifully. It's really cool. I mean, it's really cool. Yeah, so she started having some really messed up behaviors to deal with this, had failing marriage, obviously, and then goes and hikes the Pacific Coast Trail as some kind of like way to find herself.
Okay. The one other thing she had in this practical tips was one of her exercises that we're not going to do, and I'm just going to mention it because part of the reason why I'm not going into it is that it's designed to be one of those exercises where you read a bit and you write and you read a bit and you write. Mm-hmm. And it's what she calls a block exercise, which is kind of a way, assuming to unblock yourself if you're in this situation where you don't know why you should care about what you're writing.
Yeah.
So I'm not actually going to read it because that would spoil the surprise, and I might actually need to use this at some point, so I'm going to keep it like on reserve. But it is in the book, and it would be a useful thing. She does say that it's important not to spend too much time writing about why you can't write.
Yeah, I fell into that trap a couple of years ago, and then I stopped doing it. Right. But yeah, the key is you have to, the blocks exercises, you can't read ahead through the prompts.
So we're only going to mention that it's there, and if you want to pick up the book and read it, it's there. Finally, exercise. I found that her exercises here aren't so much technique of writing as kind of helping somebody that's figuring out how to write a memoir. There's one like write about someone from the past who made you feel your life or your stories were important. Write about someone from the past who made you feel like your life and stories weren't important. It feels like it's kind of get into your head and figure out what's going and what's working for you. There's another one about like a process you learned that took time, but that seems to be more like showing you that learning to write takes time. But the last one would be very interesting look into Renee in my head, which is to make a list of topics which you feel passionate. And she has a series of questions. And so I'm going to propose that we go through and we each write our little answers to that. And then the lucky person gets to reveal their soul on the podcast. And the more lucky person gets to hide it on a Patreon account.
I don't know about revealing soul. I don't know if that's a...
I don't know. I can see some of my family members being very intrigued in what I have to say to the questions.
Oh, okay, yes. I'm the overshare, so nothing is sacred. But for Kim, Kim has plenty to share. I'm actually very excited because I get to know you better.
I guess so. So we'll do that and be back in a few minutes because we'll take the time to write our answers so we'll sound very eloquent and well thought out as opposed to like the fact that we will now go and stare at a question and go, for 15 minutes.
Yeah. I have a real quick question, Kim. I don't know if this is a quick question, but we'll see how much time we've got here. What do you think of the book so far?
You know, my basic take on it is that I'm not really interested in writing a memoir. So it's a very odd experience because the other books, I'm like, there's something really valuable in it for me. And this hasn't quite hit that yet, but...
Interesting.
But also, I think it will help me understand memoir better.
Well, it might help you understand your protagonist better.
Maybe. That's a good question. I think as we go along chapters and we find one that feels close to that, we can see.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I don't know. If I were you, that's what I would do is think, okay, make a list about which my protagonist in my book, in my novel, feels passionate. Then you would be closer to your protagonist and then you'd be able to write more authentically, and they would be more of an authentic character.
I'll think about that.
Okay.
Okay. We'll be back in a moment. And we're back.
Hello.
Okay. So we talked about me possibly using this exercise and, writing it from my perspective, my character, and that didn't work out. So I wrote it as if it was talking to me. So we're going to go through my answers and responses in this podcast, and then we'll have a bonus podcast in our Patreon site where we'll go through Renee's.
Excellent.
Sometimes you do exercises and you're not quite sure what you're getting out of it. I definitely kind of felt that way about this one here. And maybe it's just because I'm not meant to be a memoirist.
Oh, I have my theories as to some of these questions, but I think it would be better if we go through some of your answers to the questions, and then we can talk about maybe like the theory as to why she has this assignment in the first place.
I think that sounds great. First one was list things I'm passionate about. I said nature. I said reading and writing, my family, society, the creative process. I thought these are like things that I would want to...
Society. What does that mean? You're turning on the composition teacher in me. I'm sorry.
Yeah. I mean, like there's also a question about what you think about. And by society, I mean, I like the way society works, the way people in a society work, the way different people affect other people.
Sociology.
Yeah, maybe that.
Interpersonal.
Interpersonal stuff. Yeah.
That's better than society because essentially all you're saying is everybody, all people.
Yeah.
Billions and billions of people. It's like you're interested in billions and billions of people. That doesn't make sense.
But I thought this like if you're really passionate about saving the dolphins, or if you're really passionate about urban development, or really passionate about, model trains, or something that you build a memoir around.
Model trains? That would be a really boring memoir. Maybe.
Probably.
Yeah. Someone would like it.
In the right hands of right memoirs, maybe. I'm sure some people would like it. Anyway, but that's what I was getting. This was kind of stuff. If you were going to write a memoir where you're kind of adjacent to something else, you'd write about your passion for something.
So an interesting take on this, Joyce Maynard, I believe her name is, she is a famous memoirist, as famous as she wrote, and people read her books. When she was, I think, 18 or 19, she dropped out of Harvard and moved in with J.D. Salinger. And yeah, talk about grooming. But anyway, so she wrote a book about that too. You can pay to go to like her workshops on memoir, and like they go on a retreat somewhere like South America or the Caribbean or something. Anyway, so you got a lot of money. She'll, totally hook you up and help you out. Well, anyway, she has some of these seminars online that I've looked at, and she has a similar question, but her question I think makes more sense to me, and that is, what are you obsessed about? Mm-hmm. So I'm kind of curious. So passion, you're saying words like society and stuff's kind of vague. So how about this? What, Kim, are you obsessed about? What is an obsession of yours?
The problem is, I think obsession almost feels kind of like something unhealthy.
Yeah, well, you're going to have to talk about challenges in a memoir, right? So
that's true. I don't know if I'm anything I'm obsessed about.
So right behind you, I see a Lego Voltron that you built. I mean, that one could argue that geek stuff is a bit of an obsession.
No, I mean, not to this. I mean, my house isn't decorated with geek stuff, Renee.
It is. A little bit?
No, I mean, I guess my problem is I don't know if there's anything in my life. I mean, other than my family, I don't know if there's anything in my life that, I give up everything else to pursue.
Okay, well, I mean, then it's your family. And there are a ton of family memoirs out there.
That's true.
So you're obsessed with your family.
But that sounds really unhealthy.
Yeah, I guess it's not working. Okay. Just so you know, dear listener, she is a very positive person. She's very, even keel. The Kim you knew yesterday is the Kim you'll know tomorrow. She doesn't, have, mood swings or anything like that, unlike me, the other cousin. So just so you know, I could kind of see
why this would be a hard question.
Why this is hard for her, because she's just pretty chill.
And the next one was, what do you argue about? And I don't really argue. I mean, I like to have discussions, but I don't like to have arguments.
I didn't think of that as an argument where I would yell at people. I think of it like an academic argument. Like if you were writing an academic essay, or, what kind of stuff did you write about as a journalist?
So actually I wrote, science was one of the things, politics, philosophy, news. I like to have those kind of conversations. I like to interact with people on those things.
General. Just be specific.
You're right.
Give me one. Okay, so there's this thing called, I keep changing the subject.
No.
Can I? Yeah. Okay, there's this thing that I teach called the ladder of abstraction.
Uh-huh.
It has to be said like that, too. Say it with me.
Ladder of abstraction.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Kim. The ladder of abstraction is pretty much just like a ranking system of words that get more specific the higher or lower up the ladder you go. So the most vague term you would start with is society.
That is the reason why I'm not good at this. Everything I have is general.
But I'm trying to fix this here. Okay. Society is the vaguest term ever. But the lower down you go on the ladder, the more specific you can get. So give me one specific thing about science. Give me a term that's more specific than science.
Well, it's AI technology.
Thank you. Okay, even more specific. What is more specific than AI technology going down that same ladder? What specifically about AI do you like?
Well, I mean, there's the whole current set of AI chatbots and large language modeling and stuff like that.
Okay, so language modeling, that's even better, right? So then, can we get more specific?
I mean, the ethical considerations of that.
Oh my God. So we went from, in 5 rings down the ladder, we went from science to the ethical concerns of AI chatbots and language models. Bam!
Yeah, but the problem is, while I would enjoy that conversation, I could easily go through ecology and the use of microorganisms to do this. The thing is, my brain can just percolate these things up. And that's part of the reason why I was a good journalist, because I could jump from topic to topic and be just as interested in each of these topics.
And that is what she's asking you to do here.
But the reason why I'm general is because I could fit 5 or 6 ones in science just off the top of my head.
Then just write them. Just write those things. There's no limit to the things you could write.
Well, I didn't want to write a whole page of stuff I was interested in, because the thing is, I'm kind of, so I can get involved with an AI conversation like that. But if everyone in the room is instead talking about the local high school or something like that, then I could jump to that conversation too. I wrote here that, honestly, I like to listen and draw things out of people far more than I want to actually jump and give my opinion.
Okay. But you have opinions.
I do, but they're...
What do you mean I do but?
They're malleable.
What do you mean they're malleable?
When you're in a conversation with somebody, you don't always let all your opinions go right there, because sometimes, that makes for the conversation being difficult. I got trained as a reporter. I love listening to other people talk about what's going on, and I tend to kind of chameleon, not necessarily automatically agree with them, but find elements that we can be in agreement in a conversation. It makes it for a much more enjoyable conversation.
Okay, so here's the thing. With memoir, it's almost like you're orating. Like this
Right.
is you.
And that's the thing. It's like with memoir.
But you do have opinions. You're just not always voicing them because you just want everyone to be happy.
Yeah.
There are no hills on which you will die.
Right.
You don't have a hill on which you will die. Come on.
I'm in my family, but
Really? There are no political hills on which you will die. There are no science hills on which you will die.
I just don't feel I have the authority to talk about that stuff. I mean, I could do it in a reportive sort of way where I have a bunch of other people supporting, but I never really felt very interested in doing nonfiction for that reason, because I just couldn't quite get myself to be that invested.
Wow. Oh, man. Oh, this is reminding me, this made me think of those memoirs by journalists, like Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, right? That guy was a journalist.
Yes.
And he did a lot of drugs, and he used his journalistic superpowers.
So, like the immoral life of Henrietta Lacks. She's investigating a whole family. She's investigating a person. She's investigating how these cells work. But there's also another train of thought. She follows herself, how she reached out to people, how she interacted with people. So, like, that makes that story a bit more of a memoir than just purely nonfiction.
Right. Anyway, okay, well, keep going. What do we got here? What do we got next?
Things that I think about. So I think about my kids and my marriage because people like to think about themselves. I think about my mental being, my mental state. I think about my future. Again, it's really general, isn't it?
Why? Why did you tackle this so generally?
I just couldn't jump into anything more specific. I don't know. I think that's the way I work, is I don't jump in there and say, this is who I am.
Okay. But this is we're reading a book on memoir.
I know.
Oh, so this is the challenge, dear listener. We're going to get Kim to actually insert herself into her art.
Yeah.
So one more. Oh, I want one specific thing out of that list.
Well, and the things I want to change my habit of procrastinating.
Oh, okay. You could write a memoir about your journey to, overcome severe procrastination. And then you'd have to investigate.
Self-help, isn't it?
No.
Okay.
Self-help is different.
Okay. So, what things happened in your life that changed everything? I could get some specifics there.
Okay. Tell me, please.
I met my future husband at a carillon concert that we both randomly stopped by to listen to.
A what concert?
A carillon.
A carillon?
A carillon's like this musical instrument built in a giant tower with bells, and then the piano, the person who plays the thing, plays down at the bottom and the bells bang.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, they got one in Berkeley. It's really nice. Anyway, so we were the only two people that stayed afterwards to tour the carillon afterwards, and that's how we met.
Aww.
So that was an event.
That did change everything.
Mm-hmm. The birth of my first child changed everything.
Yeah.
When I was in college, was applying to colleges, I knew I wanted to do molecular biology, but I really was very fuzzy on it. When I was applying to the University of Wisconsin, I got in and they're like, well, are you going to be agriculture or general? I'm like, general, but agriculture, that's a better program. Okay, well, I guess I'm in the School of Agriculture. Well, what kind of degree? Well, maybe genetics. Oh, genetics is really basic. You should do bacteriology. So,
whoa.
So it was very random how I got into it. But that definitely set my whole course because, everybody I ran into, all the research that I did, all these things are things because I ended up in the bacteriology department versus my genetics department or something.
Huh.
So definitely that changed my life.
Do you ever think about, if you got in a time machine, would you change your major?
No, I would have kept it. I love my major.
Nice.
At a certain point, I got hired in a big name science lab, so I got to do some really important research. And then the other one was getting into UC Santa Cruz and moving here. So, each of these events are kind of cascades. It put me in a specific situation where I met a bunch of people and I was part of a community, and it really, I wouldn't have done further steps in my life if I hadn't done those. All of those could actually make for a pretty good story, I think.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. How about, in a relationship? I mean, yes, okay. So all of these things are outside of you, believe it or not, I think. There are things that decisions were made, I guess, that altered the course of events in your life, which is fine. I'm kind of like, what kind of internal thing changed? Or like, how did those outside forces change you internally? Was there ever a conversation that took place that changed everything for you? Because like those are almost like milestones, according to what she was saying. Like those are like, I went to college, I did those big things, I got married. But I think maybe it would be interesting to see if there's like something a little bit more.
I mean, but those weren't milestones. It wasn't like I graduated with a bacteriology degree. It's the fact that that's the program I chose. And that Wisconsin has, University of Wisconsin-Madison has 50,000 students.
That's not very many students, is it?
50,000?
Is that a lot for a college? How many are at UC Santa Cruz?
Probably 20, 30.
Oh, shit. 50,000 is a lot.
Yeah, 50,000 is a big school. I mean, like, depending on where you start in that.
Oh, that's really going to narrow down who you talk to.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So I could have easily, and there was 3 different schools. Like I could have gone to UC Chapel Hill for my journalism thing, as opposed to UC Santa Cruz, or I was on backup list for UC Santa Cruz. So if I hadn't got in there, I would have gone to UC Chapel Hill. We would never have met.
No.
But like these are all very specific things that weren't milestones as more as they were like turning points. Like if this hadn't happened, my whole life would have curved into a completely different direction. That's what I chose for those sorts of things. And I think all of them are stuff that you could build a story from.
Yes, you could.
Mm-hmm. As far as like internal, like I don't know if I had like anyone having a specific conversation
or like any emotional event taking. Well, I guess having a child is about as emotional as you're going to get.
Right, but like I mean, there's definitely some conversations that tended to steer me a particular way, but I'm not sure if that would come if I hadn't had that conversation, if I wouldn't have steered that way anyway.
Okay. And what's the next question?
What stories are you in a hurry to tell? Like, if you go someplace you want to talk. And again, I run into the problem where, like, when I go to a group, I don't ever start with a story. I like to draw out the story of somebody else.
Well, yeah, I don't know. So there's no family story? I guess it doesn't have to be a family story.
I mean, I kind of feel like I have a whole collection of stuff, and I just pull out whatever's appropriate for the situation. I mean, if we're talking about kids stuff, I have a whole bunch of kids stories that I can pull off. If we're talking about career choices, I have those ones. If we're talking about, someone's experience traveling to Japan, I've got a bunch there too. But I'm not going to come into place to talk about my trip to Japan.
But if you do, you have to talk about the worm, the blood-sucking worm.
Leeches.
Yes, that was a fun day.
I love that story. And if I had a chance to tell it, I am totally there for telling it.
Yeah.
But you got to have the right opportunity.
Right.
Don't just drop it into the conversation.
I would totally be dropping that shit out in the conversation. But that's just me. That's my style.
And I think we're going to have a very different, we're going through this list on the bonus podcast.
Different.
We're going to have a completely different take on this. Okay. Then finally, the story that haunts you. And then the van accident. Yeah, that was a pretty bad one. So anyway, so I think I'm going to have to figure out what kind of memoir I could write, given that I obviously don't have the right personality to write.
Well, okay. You could write a memoir about how, not to say you have to, but how you find empowerment through learning how to voice your opinion instead of waiting to hear the opinions of others. That could be a memoir. And then depending on the theme you want, you could be like, feminism, having to do with, or moving from the Midwest to California may have changed you, right? Mm-hmm. Because I don't know. I'm from California, so I'm not sure, but like I'm very opinionated and I'm from California. I guess I'm assuming other people are also opinionated being from California. But I do seem to notice, like I have other friends from the Midwest, and there is a subdued quality.
I mean, I could totally write a memoir about the move to California and the stuff that was left behind and the stuff that we gained and all that stuff. But I also, I used a little bit of that in one of my short stories about the woman that became a ghost in the parking lot of Costco. That was a good one. And that was definitely drawing on those things that she knew for the Midwest and the trip and all that. It was much more unhappy. So I do use all that stuff. I just filter it.
Right, through fiction.
Through fiction, yeah.
Right. But in a memoir, you would be talking about yourself as a character. You would be the character. And then you would be talking about, see, I think that would be a good memoir. It's like how it's different for you now. This is what changed? You moved. You've embraced California.
It's a pretty great place.
California has embraced you. In fact, specifically Santa Cruz.
Yeah.
You are like, definitely Santa Cruz.
You know, as we go along, how about we plan on that being my base memoir thing? So we have like some exercises that I will focus on those, because that's actually a really good source of stuff. I could do that. Okay.
You like that?
Yeah. So I guess I got something on this exercise.
So, let's talk about the philosophy of the exercise. Why do you think she asked these questions?
Because people reply with really general answers like I do. And then they need to dig down. And my guess is I'm probably not that unusual in that when I'm asked to answer these questions, I start off with very generic stuff, because I mean, there's a subset of people out there that really do know exactly what they want to write about.
Right.
But then there's a lot of people that maybe they feel they want to write a memoir and there's things in their life that's interesting, but there's no way to put it together. I don't know.
I mean, I don't know if it had to do with specifics. I'm not sure if that was an activity on getting specific. I turned it into that.
I thought this was basically a grab bag of basically you ask a whole bunch of questions and maybe one elicits a good response, and then that might be what spurs you on, as opposed to a worksheet to fill in all the things about you that you can write a memoir about.
Yeah. I mean, I saw the activity as in my composition class, one of the questions I ask when people are coming up with research topics for their big research paper is, what do you hate?
Mm-hmm.
Or who?
Yeah.
And from there, we narrow down where somebody lies on the spectrum of opinion and their interests. Because if you hate something, it's a strong emotion and you've already got some emotional tie to a topic.
Yeah.
You know?
Yep.
I think when I ask that question, I'm trying to get them to have an opinion. That's the hardest thing, is you need to have an opinion. And if I just ask them what they love, but I love it, it's like, okay, no, you got to have some stance you're taking here. But if I say you ask what you hate, then they start getting into this territory of opinion. I think that a hill on which they will die, you know?
Exactly.
And we need a hill. And so part of a memoir is to have you have to have opinions.
That is true. That is very true.
You're taking a stance. It might be a stance in your life. It could be a stance on what happened in an event. Like, other people are going to say, well, that same thing happened and I have a different opinion about, you know, what happened or how it was perceived or whatever. And, well, then they can write their own memoir and decide at that point.
Okay. I'm really curious to see how you answer these questions, and we are going to do that on our Patreon account. Tell them about our Patreon account, Renee.
So we have a Patreon account because, of course, we do. And you can find us on Patreon/Words to Write By. And that is where the bonus podcast will be. You just sign up and you get to listen to all of our bonus podcasts.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. And they're often a lot shorter than our main podcast, so it's really good for a cleaning the house, doing the dishes sort of podcast to listen to.
Yeah. And what's nice about them is they're mostly all workshops of activities. So you can kind of see how each of us tackled something and an analysis of what happened.
And then if you're listening to this podcast through Apple Podcasts or something else, we'd love it if you gave us a rating and a review. I think that's one of the things that we could really do to boost our numbers, to have more people see us. So if you enjoy this podcast, please give us a rating. And if you know somebody who's writing a memoir or thinking about writing a memoir, then please also recommend this podcast to them.
Yeah, that would help a lot.
Okay.
All right. Cool.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
Words to Write By is produced by Renee Nelson and Kim Smiga Adam. Our theme music is Roll Back the Carpet by Cool Cat Music. Have a great day.
1 in 14 people are like manipulative sociopaths.
Yes.
I was like, what? That many? And then, you know, it all kind of explained everything at that point. I went, oh.